So I, 32, have been married to my husband, 34, for 6 years. Before we got married, he had me sign a prenup stating that our financials would always be separate and the only thing that we would share was an expense account to pay for our household-related fees. The reason for this was because he was making pretty good money and I was in graduate school, so my financial situation was pretty bad, but I signed nonetheless because I understood he wanted to protect himself. Anyway, fast forward to now, I've been out of school for 4 years and I make more than 3 times as much as he does. I've never asked him how much he makes and he's never asked me either. Anyway, 2 weeks ago I told him that I was thinking about buying a new car as the one I had was really old since I had it since my undergraduate days. He wasn't really interested and he just told me to get whatever I liked. So a week ago I decided to make a plunge and get an Audi. I was pretty excited as I always wanted one. At the time my husband was on a business trip and he got back yesterday. I showed him my car and he was really happy for me. However, later he asked me what my monthly payments were as the Audi was pretty new. At this point I told him that I made the purchase in cash and that I had no monthly payments. He was taken back and asked with what money and I answered that I made more than enough to be able to afford it. He didn't talk after that and I thought that was that. However, a few hours later, he came back to me and told me that he thinks we should void the prenup. This is where I might be the asshole because I laughed in his face. I asked him why I would agree to do that and his answer was that we're married and should share our financials. So I told him we've been married for 6 years and yet we've never shared our financials and I was fine with what we were doing. And his sudden change of heart was very suspicious. He called me a bunch of names and stormed out and didn't come home and I guess he told his family about our fight. They called to berate me and say how he supported me while I was in school. He didn't. And now I'm wondering if I was an asshole. So am I the asshole for laughing in my husband's face? Part 2, I laughed in my husband's face when he asked to void the prenup. I called into work and took a week off. I'm an independent contractor, so I didn't sign any new contracts. I sat my husband down and suggested that we should see a therapist. He refused. I asked him why he wanted to void the prenup. He said because he wanted to combine finances. So I asked to see his bank accounts and he had been misusing his money and was virtually broke. He basically had less than half of what I spent on my Audi. He had also made a series of bad investments and had apparently sold his property that he owned in NE. But most of his money went to his gambling habit. I knew he gambled, but not at the rate that I saw. I asked where we went from here if he didn't want to go to marriage counseling. He replied that since I made more, he should quit his job and follow his dreams. He wants to be a professional gambler? Is that a thing? I don't know whose money he thinks he's going to use to finance that. I asked him who would support him while he was following his dreams. Since he hadn't supported me, I would also not be supportive. My parents helped me out with the bills while I was in grad school. He flipped out and said that I was lucky to have him and that he should have dumped me for a younger woman. I replied that I should have dumped him for a younger man. I know it was childish, but I couldn't help it. He also said that it was unnatural for me to be making more than he was and that we should have at least 3 kids by now. I confessed that I also lost my shit and told him that the only younger women who would date him were the drunk or desperate ones because he had crazy written all over him. After the whole fiasco, I packed my bags, went to some friend's house, got the number for a good divorce attorney from a friend, and I will meet with him this week and hopefully start the process. I texted my soon-to-be ex that I was filing. His response? He was never going to sign the divorce papers and I was stuck with him whether I liked it or not. Honestly, everything happened so fast that I'm still in shock. I don't even know if I overreacted by talking about divorce so fast. So there's the update. I'm not sure what comes next, but thanks for everything.
Am I the asshole for refusing to remove a piece of jewelry at the request of my friend on her wedding day? My 31 female friend, 30 female, we'll call Mary, got married last week and I was in her bridal party. For context, we are friends from high school and all of the other bridesmaids were her friends from college, who I hadn't met until our bachelorette party several months ago. I was supposed to attend the wedding with my own fiance, but he contracted COVID 5 days before we were supposed to leave and made the choice to stay home for everyone's safety. I tested negative and we don't live together. Our 5th anniversary of our first date was 2 months ago, and he got me a beautiful opal necklace on a gold chain, specifically to wear to the wedding because it complemented my bridesmaid's dress. I asked Mary in our bridal group chat if she was all right with us wearing our own jewelry to the wedding. She said no problem. Day of the wedding comes, all of us bridesmaids and Mary meet early in the morning for pictures outside the chapel. Mary sees my necklace and loves it, and actually asked if she could switch her necklace with mine. Some other bridesmaids chime in and say that it would be her something borrowed. I tried as politely as I could to tell her that my fiance got this for me to wear to the wedding, and especially since he can't be here, I'd like to keep it on. Mary and the other bridesmaids were persistent, saying it was her wedding and her pictures, and I wasn't being accommodating. But I firmly told them no. Mary then said if I could at least take it off, since it looked nicer than her own jewelry. Again, I told her I'd rather not. I'd like to share the wedding photos of myself in the necklace with my fiance. She was not happy. Neither of the bridesmaids were either. I received a lot of cold shoulders and dirty looks the rest of the ceremony and reception. I felt awful. After the first dance, Mary's sister came up to me to tell me just how upset Mary was and rude it was that I upset her on her big day. Am I the asshole? It's been more than a week and I'm still thinking about it nonstop, and Mary hasn't answered any of my texts.
Oh, man, that one's kind of hard. I mean, first of all, if a necklace ruins your fucking wedding, girl, you got bigger problems.
Oh, my God.
A necklace, Mitch?
Do you want to see it?
Yeah, I want to see it. Oh, it's really pretty.
It's cute, but like
Yeah.
nothing to have your day ruined over.
No, and it's also minuscule. Like, it is so small. You probably didn't even see it. Also, why would you want to get married in a necklace that another man bought your friend? That's weird.
Your friend's fiance bought her as like an important gift.
During Halloween, someone asked me if I ever had a paranormal experience, and I told them no because I was in disbelief of ghosts, and I was actually going through paranormal things at my house for years. I denied it to keep calm, but now that I moved, I feel comfortable enough to speak on the creepy things that went down. So back in 1995, my dad had passed away, and my mom felt very uncomfortable being in our house, so we moved closer to family. I believe at the time I had to be 7, 8, and my brother was a teenager. The new house we moved in was very cold. Not just physically, but in a sense emotionally cold. Well, that's how it felt to me. The floors cracked every time you walked, and the doors would make squeak noises. The first week, my brother would play around my door and scare me, but one night, in the middle of the night, I get a knock on my door. I ignored it thinking it was my brother, and then I heard another knock and it woke me up. I got up to tell my brother to leave me alone. But when I opened up the door, there was nobody there. So like I said earlier, when I opened my door, nobody was there. I ran to my brother's room. He was asleep, so it was no way it was him. Next morning, I told my mom about it, and she assured me that ghosts weren't real. Anyways, a month later, weird things started happening to me. I started waking up in weird areas. The corner of my floor, the bathroom, and even my brother's room. He started to get weirded out and thought I was doing it on purpose, but I told him I didn't know how I got there. So that night, I begged him to stay in his room because I was scared. The next morning, I woke up to my brother staring at me. He said, "I think you sleepwalk, but you weren't really walking. You more so was dragging yourself. I saw you trying to leave the room. I called you and asked where you were going, but you weren't responding. And then you started floating in the air." I know this all sounds really crazy, but I'll explain it in part. So my brother told me that I was sleepwalking, and then I started floating in the air. My stomach dropped and I felt so scared. Then, in the middle of me fearing my own body, my brother bust out laughing. I asked him, "What's funny?" He was like, "I was messing with you." And I moved towards him and pushed him for scaring me like that. He was like, "I had to. You were so scared." And then I laid back in the bed so relieved. But then he said, "You didn't float, but you definitely were sleepwalking. It explains why you wake up in my room." I was slightly confused because I've never walked in my sleep. Heck, I didn't even know sleepwalking was a real thing. I thought it was just something that they did in the movies. That day when my mom got back from work, I told her and she agreed to take me to the doctors one of these days. After a couple weeks, I completely stopped popping up in weird places, meaning I stopped sleepwalking. At least that's what I thought. I thought this whole paranormal thing was in my head until I had a near-death experience. But something saved me, and a couple months later when I started school, I started having dreams about my dad. It'd be him preparing me for school, home making me lunch, helping me pick out clothes, but then I'd wake up from the dream and I realized that he wasn't actually there. It really saddened me, and it kept happening. I'd have that same dream over and over, and it went on for weeks. Then suddenly, I had a dream that the house we used to live in caught on fire, but in this dream, I could see myself, which felt weird. My dad had got up and started waking everyone up and telling them to go outside and leave. But when he got to me, I wasn't waking up. He kept shaking me to wake up. I'd think he'd pick me up to take me outside, but he was seriously just shaking me to wake up. He started crying, and I've never seen my dad cry, just telling me to please wake up. Then he screamed at me and said, "Wake up!" And the scream was so loud that it actually woke me out of my dream. When I opened my eyes, I must have been sleepwalking because I was one step away from falling down the stairs.
From the outside, our family looked perfect. 2 beautiful kids, a rich dad, and a loving mom. But that was just a facade. In reality, my dad was a cruel jerk who forced me to wear makeup because according to him, I looked ugly otherwise. I think he enjoyed treating me like garbage because it made him feel powerful and important. To make things worse, he saw my brother as some kind of perfect angel who couldn't do anything wrong. That's why they often teamed up on me. One time my brother came home with an F on his physics exam and blamed me for it. He said, "My sister was listening to loud music, so I couldn't concentrate and study." I responded, "That's not true at all. You are just making up excuses for being a lazy bum." But my dad took his side and punished me by making me clean my brother's room. Ugh, it was so humiliating. While I picked up his toys from the ground and put them into boxes, he threw other toys onto the ground and said, "Pick it up, sis." The worst part was how helpless I felt because no one came to my defense. I was just a kid after all. I think my mom knew how badly I was treated, but after years of living with my dad, she was too scared to stand up to my dad. One time, I even talked to her in private and said, "Mom, you need to leave Dad. He's a bad person and making you miserable." But my mom started crying and said, "Stop it, you don't understand this." I guess she couldn't admit to herself that she had wasted years of her life being married to an evil jerk. I mean, one day my dad even got arrested. It turned out that he had been dating a chick on the side, but not because he loved her, but because he used her credit card to start his own business. My dad got that poor woman $30,000 in debt without her knowing anything about it. But once she found out, she sued him, and not only did my dad have to pay the money back, he also had to serve a 6-month prison sentence. Those were the best 6 months of my life. Suddenly, it was quiet and peaceful at my home, but when my dad came back, the problem started all over again. On his first day, he accused me of being a bad daughter because I hadn't welcomed him back home. So I screamed, "At least I'm not stealing $30,000 from other people. At least I'm not treating my daughter and wife like garbage." Then I pointed my finger at him and said, "You are a criminal. You exploit other people and don't care if you hurt them. You are absolutely disgusting, and I wish you dropped dead." I wasn't sure how he would react, but then my brother said, "Sister, why don't you tell Dad about your boyfriend?" I froze. How did my brother know I was in a relationship? Well, that's what my dad had waited for. He started screaming and calling me a whore, saying I had brought shame onto our family for losing my V-card at such a young age. I responded, "Yes, I have a boyfriend, but we haven't even kissed each other, so relax." But my dad didn't care and screamed, "Once you're 18, I'm gonna throw you out of this house and onto the streets. I'm ashamed to have you as my daughter." Well, my 18th birthday was still 2 years away, so my dad had plenty of time to make my life hell. He even put a lock on my door, so I had to send him a WhatsApp message if I needed to go to the bathroom. But I knew the way he treated me wasn't right, so I gathered evidence on my smartphone by recording how he terrorized me. Then, after school, I went to the police and showed them video footage of how I was treated. When they saw that I wasn't allowed to go to the toilet without my dad's permission, they decided to take my dad into custody. And when he got trialed the next week, the judge called him a monster and sentenced him to 8 months in prison. It felt so good to finally get revenge on my dad. But my mom wasn't happy at all. She said, "How shall we survive without your dad's income?" I responded, "It's not my fault that you married a jerk. Now you have to live with the consequences because I'd rather be poor than live with him for one more day." But we never became poor because my mom broke up with my dad after she found a new boyfriend who treated her with more respect. But it was too late, because my brother had already become just like my dad. One time I came home while he was making out with his girlfriend on the kitchen table. The girl was half naked and said, "Oh my God, this is so embarrassing." She tried to stand up, but my brother said, "I don't want to stop." And then he continued kissing her. I said, "That's not how you treat a girl. If she wants to stop, you have to let her go." That's when my brother stood up and came over to me. He pushed me against the wall and said, "You don't tell me what to do. Better be careful before I'll slap that arrogance out of your face." That's when his girlfriend pushed him from behind and said, "Let her go. She didn't do anything." My brother got seriously angry, turned around and screamed, "Shut up." Then he pushed her back more and more. I really thought he was going to hurt her, so I jumped on his back and screamed, "Leave her alone!" But he just took my hand and twisted it so hard that I started screaming out of pain. He said, "You cry like a little girl." And that's when I had enough and bit right into his neck. What happened next is too graphic and violent to show on YouTube, but my brother had to go to the hospital because I had bitten through some important vein, and he almost died of blood loss. The next day I moved out. I had enough of men like my brother and dad. I swore to myself I would never date a guy again. They were all the same anyway. Instead, I went to college and tried to focus on my studies. But as luck had it, my professor gave me a boy as a project partner. His name was David. He was so full of himself. He said, "Okay, I'm gonna lead this project and you will follow my orders." I wanted to tell him to F off, but he was so confident and smart that I only responded, "Okay." However, he was never satisfied with my work, and he even called me a lazy turtle. But I liked it. The angrier he got at me, the more I wanted to rip his shirt off and kiss him. Gosh, I'd never been so attracted to a guy, so I always dressed up when we met. I said, "So, do you have any plans for the weekend?" While fluttering my eyes at him. He responded, "I'm sorry, I already have a girlfriend and I will take her out on a date." I blushed and felt like such an idiot. When I got home, I immediately found out who his girlfriend was. She had many photos of her and David on Instagram, and they were such a cute couple. I should have felt happy for them, but I was so in love with David that my heart was aching. But one time, his girlfriend came by to give David a folder. And when she saw me wearing a short summer dress and lots of makeup, she immediately knew what I was up to. She said, "So, you are my boyfriend's project partner?" I responded, "Yeah, I am." She leaned over the table and said, "Do you always dress like this?" I blushed, but didn't respond. Then David said, "Don't worry, she always dresses like a hoe." I knew he only wanted to ease the tension, but his girlfriend got angry and said, "Stop defending her. Don't you see that she's trying to seduce you?" David responded, "I know what she's trying to do, but I already told her I'm not interested in dating her because I have a girlfriend." Now I blushed even heavier. This was so embarrassing. His girlfriend said to me, "You try to seduce my boyfriend even though you know he's in a relationship with me? Shame on you. And David, from now on, you won't meet up with her again." He responded, "I'm sorry, but she is my project partner, so I can't stop working with her." Suddenly she screamed, "If you don't get away from that whore right now, it's over between us." He looked at her and said, "Fine, it's over." I could see how much his ex-girlfriend was hurt, but she didn't respond and just walked away. David said, "I'm sorry, she's always like that." I said, "No, I'm sorry. I'm such a horrible person." Then he looked me in the eyes and said, "Let's stop studying for today and watch a movie at my place instead." Oh my God, I knew I should have said no, but I couldn't resist. I just loved him too much. When we sat down on his couch, he put his arm around me. I'd never had a guy I was attracted to touch me like that. I cuddled myself against his chest and he said, "Oh, my cute little turtle." I think we were about to kiss each other when his smartphone rang. He took it out and said, "It's my ex." He picked up and I heard her say, "I'm sorry about what happened today. Of course I don't want to break up with you. I just had a bad day. I hope you can forgive me." But David responded, "No, it's over between us. I'm sick of your endless drama." And then he hung up. Meanwhile, I felt incredibly guilty because I was part of the reason they had split up. That's why I told David, "It's better for me to go home now." Of course he wanted me to stay, but I left anyway. But when I had reached the door of his building, I saw his ex-girlfriend sitting outside on the stairs crying. I didn't want her to see me, so I went back into David's apartment and spent the night there. It was the first time I slept in a bed with a guy. David tried kissing me, but I told him no. However, the next morning, I woke up with David's arms around me and it felt so good. I turned around and when he woke up, he said, "There's my little turtle." And then he gave me a kiss. And yes, we are in a relationship now.